Iowa Speedway will join the NASCAR Cup Series schedule in 2024. Nick Sanchez and Matt Crafton have been handed some pretty big penalties, and AM Racing is expected to announce their 2024 NASCAR Xfinity Series lineup. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start and talk about IHOP. As it was announced earlier today that IHOP will sponsor Eric Almirola for 2 races in 2023. They're going to sponsor him at the Charlotte Roval this week, and then they'll sponsor him at Las Vegas as well. This has been teased for the last 2 weeks. Really great to see that IHOP is sponsoring Eric Almirola. I think the paint scheme looks exciting. I think it looks incredible, and nonetheless fantastic and amazing to see that IHOP is going to sponsor Eric Almirola and Stewart-Haas Racing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Devin Jones. As it was announced yesterday that Devin Jones will drive a 74 for CHK Racing this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. I believe this will be his first, attempting to make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. Now, Devin Jones, I believe, has won the Rolex 24 in a previous class, I think in either the GT or the GTAM class in the past back in 2018. So this guy knows how to get it done in racing. We obviously know CHK Racing shown a little bit of improvement throughout the 2023 season. Nonetheless, glad to see that Devin Jones will get an opportunity and shot to make his debut with CHK Racing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Conor Daly. As it was announced yesterday that Conor Daly will drive the 53 for Rebus Motorsports this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Conor Daly, a veteran of the IndyCar Series and also a veteran of the NASCAR Xfinity Series and a couple Cup starts as well. He's got a lot of experience racing now, and I think Conor Daly will have a really good chance to make the field. I think the 53 car is in a pretty good position at owners' points, and like I said, Conor Daly is a pretty good road course racer overall. Go back to his IndyCar days and also back to his NASCAR days. So really glad to see this, and nonetheless very happy to see that Conor Daly will be driving for Rebus Motorsports this weekend at the Roval. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Andy Lally. As it was announced on Monday that Andy Lally will be driving 87 for Peterson Racing Group this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. In addition to that, Andy Lally will also be driving a 15 car for Rickler Racing as well in the Cup Series as well. Now, a lot of people are looking at this. We got a new team joining NASCAR. A lot of people are wondering, who is this Peterson Racing Group team? Well, they are going to have an alliance with RCR, so they'll be getting RCR engines. And this team actually, according, I can't remember, I think it was Kyle Williams who put this out in the comment section on Twitter, but apparently this team has won some Trans Am races and Trans Am championships as well. So this team knows how to get it done. So it's really awesome to see a new organization, a new team showing up to the Xfinity Series. And I didn't know if this team was going to have a chance and opportunity to make it, but I think that they actually have a really good opportunity, chance to make the field. Andy Lally is a great road course racer, and we know that this team could have a chance, a possibility to make it to the event. They do have to qualify their way in, though, on owners' points. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Meyer Shank Racing. As Meyer Shank Racing announced this morning that they will not be racing in IMSA in 2024. The reason why they're not racing IMSA in 2024 is because they're going to be focusing fully on their IndyCar program. Obviously, Meyer Shank Racing has taken, like I said, they're taking a backseat with their IMSA program to focus on their IndyCar program for next year. Because let's be honest, their IndyCar program for Meyer Shank Racing has not done as well as their supercar, their IMSA program. Now, that being said, they did say that maybe in the future they may return, but right now they're not going to return in 2024. And it's a shame because Meyer Shank Racing has won the last 2 Rolex 24s at Daytona, but they're losing some of their drivers next year. You've got Tom Blomqvist, of course, who has been driving for the Meyer Shank Racing team this year. He's going to be focusing a lot on racing in IndyCar full-time next year. Helio Castroneves, who's also been driving Meyer Shank Racing this season, he is, of course, going to be basically working as a co-owner of the team. So I think that their main focus is to try to get their IndyCar program in a much better position because, like I said, their IndyCar team has not done as well. While it's disappointing to say that their IndyCar team is going to be gone at the end of their IMSA team is going to be gone at the end of the year, it is going to be good to see the focus on the IndyCar program and try to make their team better. They're going to have Tom Blomqvist next year and, of course, Felix Rosenqvist joining the team. So I think it's going to be a really solid organization for Meyer Shank Racing going into the 2024 IMSA season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the Owners' Championship. Now, over the last 2 weeks, really since the playoffs have begun in 2023, there's been a lot of chatter talking about the Owners' Championship and not getting a lot of focus from the media and a lot of the fans as well. And earlier tonight on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, Jeff Gordon spoke on the SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, and he says that there needs to be more focus on the Owners' Championship by the media. And the big reason he says that is because of the money that comes into play with the Owners' Championship, because that's what the owners of NASCAR Day look at, is how much money they're going to get at the end of the year. Now, while I do agree with Jeff Gordon that we should focus on the Owners' Championship, one of the only really big reasons why Jeff Gordon's even talking about this in the first place is because, of course, Chase Elliott is in that Owners' Championship. If Chase Elliott was not in the Owners' Championship and in the Owners' battle right now, I don't think Jeff Gordon would care as much. And I do agree we probably should focus on the Owners' Championship a lot more, but no one really cares. Let's be honest, NASCAR doesn't put a lot of stock into that. Just like they don't put a lot of stock into the regular season championship throughout the whole entire year. And I would love to see NASCAR focus on a lot of that more. But you don't see them focusing on that as much simply because of the fact that, they focus on the Drivers' Championship because that's where the money comes in. And if Chase Elliott was in the playoffs, I think a lot of people would tune in more and watch. We've seen TV ratings go down at times, so sometimes it has gone up throughout the year. Nonetheless, I don't think as many people care about the Owners' Championship. It's kind of disappointing, but I'm not shocked and surprised that not as many people care about that Owners' Championship. I don't completely disagree with Gordon. I kind of agree, actually, but I don't think NASCAR fans are going to care as much about the Owners' Championship as they do with the Drivers' Championship, even though a lot of fans are not big fans of the current platform, though more fans are becoming fans over time. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Andretti Global. Now, we've talked about Andretti Global a lot on this channel over the last few weeks, and it's because they've been trying to get into Formula One. Well, yesterday morning, it was finally officially confirmed by many reports and Andretti themselves that the FIA has officially approved Andretti F1 bid to join the F1 grid. The process now goes F1 for commercial discussions. Obviously, over the last few months, I've talked about this really for the last year or two, Andretti has been trying to get into Formula One because they've been having a stock they talk about as far back as last year, and they had a driver like Colton Herta ready to go if they were going to go to Formula One in 2023. Now, of course, a lot of the F1 teams did not want them to come in because more money was going to have to be put into it, and a lot of these teams in Formula One were going to end up losing a ton of money. So that's why they were denying them getting a chance and opportunity. They were trying to increase how much the entry fee was going to be from $200 million up to $1 billion. And a big reason is because they all wanted to keep the amount of money that they ended up happening. A big reason why the FIA also approved them is because they're bringing a new manufacturer in, and that is Cadillac. Look at Formula One right now. Formula One's been starting to drop off just a little bit. And I think a big reason also why they got approved, to be honest with you guys, is because of the fact that they do have a stock to where they have a new manufacturer coming in and more American fans are going to tune in. Now, if they do get approved by F1 to get in and they are able to get in the F1 grid, who will drive for the team? Well, I think it's obvious that Colton Herta is the most likely first option. Colton Herta does want to go to Formula One. We had teams like Red Bull that were trying to get him into his academy, and I think that Colton Herta would be the first option to go to that team. The other option, I think, comes down to Daniel Ricciardo and Kyle Kirkwood. Daniel Ricciardo is currently in Formula One. He'll be with them in 2024, I believe, with Alpine or AlphaTauri next year in 2024. But I think in 2025, Andretti joins the grid that year. I would think that he could go there. And there's also Kyle Kirkwood, and also I'll mention Liam Lawson as well. Liam Lawson, I think, is a very, very talented driver. He's done a really good job with AlphaTauri, substituting for Daniel Ricciardo. And, of course, we will be seeing Liam Lawson drive in Qatar this weekend. But Daniel Ricciardo more than likely will return at the Circuit of the Americas in later this month in October. So I think it's very exciting to see, though, that Andretti is coming to Formula One. And I think it's absolutely huge. Obviously, F1 teams have been against it, but I think this is huge for the sport. And now you've got an American-based team coming to Formula One. Again, a lot of these F1 teams don't care about Americans. They care about American dollars and American spending. Hopefully, this also can cut the cost on ticket sales going forward as well. Nonetheless, amazing, awesome to see that Andretti Global has finally been approved, and they are coming to Formula One or likely joining Formula One in the near future. Really awesome stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. Now, on Sunday night after the NASCAR Cup Series race, Kevin Harvick unfortunately was disqualified due to, I think, window fasteners that were not secure. Certainly, I believe some of the bolts had not been secure on those window fasteners on the windshield that were kind of coming loose, and NASCAR disqualified them for that. So Kevin Harvick did not score any stage points, and instead of finishing second, and he was part of that really awesome photo finish with Ryan Blaney, Kevin Harvick, it said, ends up finishing last. And there have been some questions that maybe, just maybe, Stewart-Haas Racing was potentially going to go ahead and appeal the disqualification. Well, Stewart-Haas Racing executive Greg Zipadelli came out yet earlier today in a statement, or Monday I should say, and he says that while they're disappointed with the decision that NASCAR has made and they are investigating the situation, they are not going to appeal the penalties that they received, and a disqualification is going to stand. I'm not surprised that they're basically going to stand with disqualification. I think that they could have had an opportunity in case here maybe to appeal, but this just goes to another example of the struggles of Stewart-Haas Racing really over the last year. You've had Kevin Harvick, who's had 2 penalties. Remember, after Talladega last year, Kevin Harvick got a 100-point penalty, and they tried to appeal it, and they lost that appeal, a big 100-point penalty. Then Cole Custer was handed, I think, a $200,000 fine, and was basically handed a massive penalty for trying to help and manipulate the race with Chase Briscoe. You go over to Tony Stewart's drag racing team, where Tony Stewart's team got disqualified about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then this year you had Chase Briscoe got handed the biggest penalty an individual driver's had in NASCAR history for basically having a counterfeit part, and guess what? They finished dirty from that race, so it didn't even give them the competitive advantage. They completely struggled. But I think it's Stewart-Haas Racing. They really have a lot of things they need to work on. And it's a shame, too, for Kevin Harvick, because we should be focusing on how great of a year it should be for Kevin Harvick. Instead, we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing struggles, and this team really has not done great. Now, obviously, they've got Josh Berry coming into the team in 2024, but they're going to be losing Kevin Harvick at the end of this year. And there's a really great chance that Eric Almirola is also going to retire at the end of 23, I should say. And you're not going to have a guy like Zane Smith there. You're not going to have Kyle Larson or Kyle Busch available because they've signed for the teams, and SHR had an opportunity to pick up those guys. I think now they're regretting not picking up those guys. It's just a shame for SHR, and it's just a shame for Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick 1,000% deserves better than what he has gotten. I think Kevin Harvick's a great driver, and it's just a shame to see the things that have been going on with Stewart-Haas Racing, and hopefully things can get repaired and fixed going forward into the future for this team. Nonetheless, disappointing stuff, and I'm not surprised that they are not going to appeal that disqualification. Not shocked by it at all. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rebus Motorsports. As there was reported by Auto Auction, V8 Sleuth, and Adam Stern that Rebus Motorsports is intending to race in NASCAR in 2024. For those who do not know who Rebus Motorsports is, Rebus Motorsports currently races in supercars with drivers, I believe, like Shane Van Gisbergen, and also they compete with Brody Kostecki. Brody Kostecki over the last 2 weeks said his intentions to run at least up to 3 NASCAR Cup Series races in 2024. And we all thought maybe it was going to be with Richard Childress Racing. It turns out that he's going to be driving for Rebus Motorsports. This team is one of the most successful teams in the supercar leagues, and they're going to have a great job to bring over with Brody Kostecki. Now, Rebus Motorsports also has a major connection with Richard Childress Racing, and they intend to run next year, and they will have a Richard Childress Racing alliance going into 2024. Now, they have not announced what said races they are going to run in the 2024 season yet. A big reason for that is because the schedules for the V8 Supercars and the NASCAR Cup Series and NASCAR in general have not been released yet, though later today it's likely that it is going to end up getting released for 2024. So eventually we should be hearing what races they are going to run. But it's really cool to see this Australian movement that's been happening in NASCAR. Obviously, you've got Shane Van Gisbergen. Granted, he's from New Zealand, but he competed in the V8 Supercars, and Shane Van Gisbergen's got a development deal with Trackhouse Racing for 2024. He's going to run some NASCAR Cup Series races with the team. Probably going to run Nice Motorsports and Trucks, Pinnacle Racing Group, and ARCA and late models. And then, of course, he's probably going to be running with Colleague Racing in the Xfinity Series as well. He's probably going to run a lot of races in Xfinity. That's where a bulk of his schedule is going to be for 2024. And I think it's really cool to see all these Australian drivers coming over and racing NASCAR because the V8 Supercars are very similar, or the Repco Supercars, I should say, are very similar to NASCAR Cup Series cars because they kind of are like a supercar, and that's what NASCAR said that the intention was the car that they have is kind of similar to a supercar, and that's why Shane Van Gisbergen was able to win that race at the Chicago Street Course not too long ago. I think it is very exciting nonetheless to see that you have a team like a Rebus Motorsports coming over, and I'd love to see it. I hope they run the Daytona 500. It'd be really cool to see them run. Obviously, Brody Kosecki would have to be proved to run, so maybe they get a driver like maybe Austin Hill perhaps to drive for the team. But like I said, I think it's really exciting to see a new team come in NASCAR, and there's going to be more potential possibilities of more full fields for next year because you got a lot of teams looking to join, some expansions happening for 2024. I think it's just so exciting to see, and nonetheless, glad to see a new organization coming over, and Brody Kosecki will be that driver in 2024 for the organization. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we're talking about AM Racing. Now, we have talked quite a bit about AM Racing on this channel over the course of the last few weeks. A major reason for that is because about a week or two ago, I think it was right before the weekend, this past week, or right before Texas weekend, they confirmed that they are going to be expanding their Xfinity Series operation from 1 to 2 cars headed into 2024. And yesterday, or on Monday when you're watching this video, AM Racing announced that they will be having an announcement in regards to their 2024 plans on Thursday at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. And it's really in regards to their 2024 NASCAR Xfinity Series driver lineup. So who could potentially be driving for their Xfinity Series team headed into 2024? Well, there's definitely a lot of people who could be driving for this team in 2024. Well, someone who could be driving for the team is Brett Moffett. Brett Moffitt's been driving a 25 car for AM Racing throughout the 2023 season, and Brett Moffett has been having a fantastic year with the organization. However, in the last week or so, it's been reported that Brett Moffett may not be returning to AM Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. Obviously, there is a chance that could end up happening. But recently, there's been a lot of chatter circulating that Brett Moffett could be leaving AM Racing in 2023 and could be headed back to the Truck Series to race for Rebus Motorsports in 2024. Rebus is looking to potentially expand their Truck Series program going into the 2024 season, so that could be a potential ride there. So if Brett Moffett does not return to the organization in 2024, that means that there's going to be 2 rides that are going to end up being available. The driver that's been most linked to AM Racing for 2024 has, of course, been Hailie Deegan. We've talked about Hailie Deegan quite a bit on this channel because she does want to move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. And while I do believe she has struggled in the Truck Series this year, I think that in the one start that she ran for SS Greenlight Racing last year at Las Vegas, I think that was more impressive than what she's done in the Truck Series. And to her credit, she did get a top 10 very recently at Talladega. She's gotten 5 career Truck Series top 10s. Not the most impressive stats, and she's been driving for ThorSport Racing. So like I said, she has not had a great year with ThorSport Racing. However, I think if she moves up the Xfinity Series, I think there is a chance that she could do better. So she's heavily linked to that ride, and I think it'd be really cool for her to have a chance and opportunity. Some drivers have done better in other series than others, and maybe she could be a candidate. It sounds like she may be one of the lead candidates for that ride as well. Another driver who could be driving for AM Racing in 2024 is Christian Rose. Christian Rose currently drives their AM Racing in ARCA, and I think Christian Rose had a couple really strong runs. In fact, I believe finished in the top 5 in this past weekend's race in ARCA at Salem, getting a podium finish in 3rd place. And Christian Rose, of course, was supposed to drive in select Xfinity Series races and more Truck Series races than he has this year, but I don't know if sponsorship funding's been a hold up on that. But Christian Rose has been heavily linked to potentially drive for this team as well for 2024 in the Xfinity Series. Other drivers that could drive for this team, Matt DiBenedetto's driver I will mention. Matty D does not have a ride currently for 2024. And I think if he goes to AM Racing, I think he will actually do overall a pretty good and solid job with the organization if he does end up there. One thing to note about AM Racing is there's been even some rumblings recently that AM Racing could be the new top 4 team going to 2024 because there's been some chatter recently from some people that Stewart-Haas Racing Xfinity Series program could end up shutting down at the end of this year, though I do think Stewart-Haas Racing Xfinity program is going to be sticking around. I think it's very interesting to see. I'll mention Frankie Muniz as well as another potential possibility of going to maybe AM Racing in 2024 because he does want to move up to Xfinity or Trucks next year. We'll see what happens, though, there. But I think it's really cool that AM Racing is looking to expand. This team has been very, very impressive this year in the Xfinity Series, and I think that they've put a lot of focus in the Xfinity program. They've got alliance with Stewart-Haas Racing, and I think this team has gotten better overall. So we'll see what happens in regards to what's going to happen AM Racing going into 2024. But they will have their announcement for 2024, it sounds like, on Thursday morning, and we'll probably cover their announcement on this channel. I do believe it's going to be Haley Deegan and Christian Rose more than likely with AM Racing next year, but there could be a potential surprise and possibly with the team for 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Nick Sanchez and Matt Crafton. Now, there has been a lot of talking about Nick Sanchez and Matt Crafton this week because if you watched the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Talladega Super Speedway, you saw the fight that took place after. The reason that it happened is because coming to 2 laps ago in the Truck Series race at Talladega, there was some contact on the racetrack where Matt Crafton may have come down, but Nick Sanchez was also trying to force the issue, and they collided and got into each other, and it caused a pretty big and bad crash, and unfortunately, a lot of drivers ended up being involved in that wreck. And after that ended up taking place, Matt Crafton had parked his truck inside Nick Sanchez's pit stall. After the Truck Series race had concluded, Nick Sanchez has spoken to the media outside of his truck. Nick Sanchez was going back to his hauler, according to him, and he says he was jumped and sucker punched by Matt Crafton. Now, they basically said his mother kind of said the same thing. Matt Crafton said that wasn't the case and didn't end up happening. He wasn't sucker punched, and he kind of compared being sucker punched out of the racetrack in the wreck as well. So a lot of people are wondering what the penalties are that were going to be levied to Nick Sanchez and Matt Crafton, or if any penalties were going to end up being sent out at all. Well, there were some penalties that were actually sent yesterday. I'm a little shocked by the ruling. So let's start off first with Matt Crafton. Matt Crafton probably got the biggest penalty. Well, maybe not the biggest penalty here, but Matt Crafton, who we all thought probably should have been suspended, got a $25,000 fine. Nick Sanchez has been fined $5,000, and his father, Nick Sanchez's dad, Rene Sanchez, has been suspended for the final 2 races. Now, let's get into the explanations on why they were penalized. Matt Crafton, of course, for causing a sucker punch in a fight, was handed the biggest penalty, at least on the fine side. Nick Sanchez got a $5,000 fine because he said, "I'm going to effing kill you" at Homestead. So the threat is a big reason why, even though NASCAR said it was a heat-of-the-moment situation, they said it was not acceptable regardless, so that's why Nick Sanchez had gotten a penalty. And then the dad getting suspended, a little bit questionable if you ask me, which I'm going to give my thoughts and opinions on this. Look, $25,000 is nothing. And I understand that NASCAR is being consistent here in some senses where they usually do not suspend drivers for being involved in fights. The last time I think someone had been suspended for a fight was back in 2019, or the fine, I think, back in 2019 there. And of course, a lot of people look at what happened to Austin Hill and Meyer last year for another reason why they did not suspend anybody. But in my opinion, Matt Crafton, according to reports, has said is that he hung behind the tires and waited for Nick Sanchez. And that was a pretty massive and huge reason why I think Matt Crafton should have been suspended, or at least had a talking to by NASCAR. At least he's getting fined and not getting off scotch-free. But $25,000, even though it's a lot more for a Truck Series driver than a Cup Series driver, $25,000 is still a little bit low-balling of the penalty. As for Nick Sanchez, while I do agree that probably he shouldn't have said that, I would have not given Nick Sanchez a penalty at all. In fact, I would have not even given him a fine at all because Nick Sanchez, well, at least the penalty isn't very high, and Nick Sanchez, it says, we'll take it on a chin, we'll focus on Homestead at this point. Nick Sanchez should not even got fined, in my opinion, because Nick Sanchez said that in the heat of the moment. And I would have probably, if I got sucker punched, and it sounds like it's true that he got sucker punched, if I got sucker punched, I would absolutely probably say the same thing, and I would be more mad, and I probably would have beaten his ass up just a little bit more. So I don't agree with Nick Sanchez getting a $5,000 fine, but I guess the threat is a big reason. I know he shouldn't have said that, but at the same token, same time, I don't agree with that ruling. And then finally got the dad being suspended. Some people say that his dad should have been suspended. I completely disagree on this one. I think what really baffles me on the situation too a little bit is the fact that the father gets suspended for 2 weeks for his son, defending his son, but Matt Crafton, who sucker punched a driver hiding behind the tires, he doesn't get more than a $25,000 fine. I don't understand the logic here by NASCAR and the fact that they were considering his dad a pit crew member. Like, what? That's my son. If that was my son and if I had a kid, I would 1,000% go and defend my son. So I do not agree with the decision at all whatsoever. I personally believe that Matt Crafton should have been suspended maybe for one race, or at the minimum should have had double the fine, maybe around $50,000. Again, we don't really have the full video and the context of everything. It's been he said, she said. But there's been no witnesses that have come out and defended Matt Crafton. Now, maybe there were some witnesses that were there that saw what transpired, and maybe are Matt Crafton's side and are going to defend Matt Crafton in the situation. But my personal opinion is that if Matt Crafton did truly sucker punch Nick Sanchez, he probably should have been suspended. Now, a lot of people are going to say with the Austin Hill stuff, but they were having a conversation before, and Austin Hill had told my sider to back off last year. Nonetheless, there's penalties that were handed out. At least some justification came out. But in my opinion, I don't think it was a fully justified penalty. But hey, there were penalties expected. Normally 5, so you don't see penalties come out unless there's picker members involved. And glad to see there were some penalties for Matt Crafton, but I feel like there should have been more harsh penalties for Matt Crafton. I think it's ridiculous that Matt Crafton got in a fight with a 22-year-old driver. Yes, I know he's an adult, but Matt Crafton should not be feuding, especially with a Super Speedway incident, and he should absolutely know better. I think it was a bad decision on Matt Crafton's behalf, and Matt Crafton, he may be a cool guy to talk to, but let's be honest with ourselves. Matt Crafton looks really, really foolish and looks really, really stupid, in my honest opinion, for this. And I think Matt Crafton got very lucky, and NASCAR kind of petted a slap on the wrist to Matt Crafton. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Iowa Speedway. Now, I talked about this on the channel yesterday that Iowa Speedway was expected to return to the NASCAR Cup Series and return to NASCAR in 2024. I should say be added to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule in 2024. Well, it was confirmed earlier today around noon Central Standard Time that Iowa Speedway, in fact, will be being added to the NASCAR Cup Series schedule for the first time in 2024. The NASCAR Xfinity Series is going to run on June 15th, and then the Cup Series race will run on June 16th, meaning that the Father's Day race is going to be returning in 2024. And this also, like I said, is going to be a night race as well. I believe it will be at 6:30 Central Standard Time at Iowa Speedway. This, of course, was the backup plan. Originally, they were looking to go to Montreal. We'll talk about that in a second. But I want to talk about Iowa Speedway coming back on the NASCAR and returning to NASCAR, because this is the first time that Iowa has been on the NASCAR schedule in any series since 2019. Technically, I believe Brett Moffett had won that race in 2019, or Ross Chastain across the finish line first in the Truck Series race. If I'm not mistaken, I think it might have been Chase Briscoe who won the last Xfinity Series race at the racetrack as well. And I think this track has always put on some really exciting and great racing. And it's really great to see a track that's been having a fantastic resurgence getting on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, because you look at what IndyCar has done, especially with Hy-Vee, what they've done for Iowa Speedway. And I think it's really cool that we're going to get another short track on the schedule. Now, a lot of people are really concerned about the racing product that we're going to see at Iowa Speedway. Well, yes, the short track product and the short track package has not gone very, very well at all for Iowa Speedway. One thing that does benefit Iowa Speedway is they do have multiple grooves available, so you're going to have not just a low line to use, but you're going to have a high line that's going to be able to use. So I think the racing at Iowa should be better than what we've seen at maybe Bristol and Richmond as well, though I will say the spring Richmond race has been very, very cool. Now, remember, I talked about this, I believe, yesterday as well, but Iowa Speedway had not been originally the track that was going to come back. The plans had been then for them to go to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, and it sounded very likely that Circuit Gilles Villeneuve was going to more than likely be on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule in 2024. However, they're doing this as a backup plan, and just for the record, Iowa Speedway is the replacement race for Fontana Speedway. So that's really good. At least we have a replacement race set, and it's according to reports as well, Iowa Speedway is expected to be the only new track on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. It's a shame we're not going to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. I do believe that NASCAR needs to go international. I think there's a good chance that it could happen still in 2025, because NASCAR, trust me, they truly do want to go international in the 2025 season or in the future. They were really trying to get Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, but unfortunately they were denied this year because the F1 race had originally taken the original date. Remember, June 12th, that June 15th weekend, I believe, is when the F1 race is going to end up taking place. So that's a massive reason why we're not racing at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve this year. And it's really unfortunate. Circuit Gilles Villeneuve always put on great race in the Xfinity Series. It's a shame we're not returning, but it's understandable why. Now, speaking of the 2024 NASCAR schedules, those are expected to be released later today. Here's what we know as of now for the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series schedule. We know the Busch Light Clash is returning on February 3rd. That was confirmed, or the 4th, I should say. The Daytona 500 is going to be on February 18th. North Wilkesboro will have the All-Star race once again in 2024. That will take place on May the 19th. There are going to be 2 Bristol Concrete dates in 2024 as well. There's also going to be the season finale on, I believe, November 3rd. And then you've also got the Breaker of Honor returning on my mother's birthday on July 21st as well. And the Coco 600 is expected to also return on May 26th. Like I mentioned, 2 Bristol Concrete dates. And Texas is also expected to be moving to the spring in 2024 as well. So the schedule is finally coming together, and it sounds like it will be coming at some point later today. So going back to Iowa Speedway, though, I am very happy to see a new track on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. As much as I think a lot of fans will agree with me that, it's disappointing to see the Montreal is not coming on. At least we got a good track that's coming into play. And like I said, I think IndyCar has done a fantastic job with their concerts at the racetrack, and Harvick's done a fantastic job working with the track and getting that track back up to speed. And I think NASCAR should do something very, very similar. I think they should have kind of like the concerts in the corn. They kind of did that this year with Ed Sheeran, Carrie Underwood, Zach Brown Band, and Kenny Chesney. And I think it was an absolute massive and a major, major success, not just for IndyCar, but racing in general as well. And I think it's just phenomenal to see a track like Iowa Speedway is going to be added for 2024. It'd be really good to go to. Again, we're starting to get the schedule finally, and I think it's really exciting to see a track like Iowa getting added. To be honest, I didn't think that this was going to happen until a few weeks ago. This happened rumored a few weeks ago that this was going to happen, and it's amazing and cool to see. And if I'm not mistaken, too, ARCA is also going to be happening, I believe, on that Friday night. The Xfinity Series race is going to take place in the afternoon at 2:30 Central Standard Time, so it will be Central Standard Time. And, of course, the Sunday night NASCAR Cup Series race, man, that's going to be really, really fun and really, really exciting. So, nonetheless, I think it's awesome to see. I'm very pumped up that Iowa Speedway will host a NASCAR Cup Series date in 2024. I think this is massive and huge for the sport. And the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series schedule is expected to be released later today. So that's really exciting stuff as well. So that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links go below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about Iowa Speedway being added to the 2024 schedule? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel, including AM Racing's 2024 plans, and also the other stories we talked about today on the channel? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, we're going to have a video talking about the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series schedule and all the other schedules that end up being released. Then tomorrow on the channel, we'll have 2 videos. We'll have race picks for the Cup Series race of the Roval, and also we will have the AM Racing video announcement coming out. Then on Friday, there should be a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel, maybe a preview for the Charlotte Roval. And then on Saturday, we'll have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race view from the Roval. And then, of course, on Sunday, we'll have the NASCAR Cup Series race view from the Charlotte Roval as we get closer to the end of 2023. Got a lot of awesome, great content dropping on the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.